Welcome to Mr. and Mrs. English. Speak with confidence, learn with ease. Start your English journey today.
Hello and welcome back to Mr. and Mrs. English channel. I am Daniel. Hope you all are doing wonderful. Only after 2 iterations of tweaking my routine did I realize how much gentle stretching right after waking up helps me avoid that groggy feeling. It's like my body gets a signal that the day is actually starting.
That's interesting, Daniel. And I am Emma. I've found that drinking a big glass of water first thing is non-negotiable for me. There's research showing that even mild dehydration can reduce alertness by up to 20%, so I treat hydration as my morning priority. I am Mia. Thank you, Emma and Daniel, for having me with you all in this Mr. and Mrs. English channel. But what if your schedule is unpredictable? If you're rushing out the door, does the ritual still work, or does it just become another stressor?
I think it depends on how flexible the ritual is. For me, even a 2-minute stretch and a few deep breaths make a difference, regardless of how busy the morning gets.
I agree, but I also track how my energy changes if I skip my water. On days I forget, I notice I'm sluggish until mid-morning. It's almost like my brain expects that signal to switch gears. So, is it the habit itself or the intention behind it that matters more? If someone just goes through the motions, does their brain really register that the day has started?
Here's the takeaway. Whether it's stretching, hydration, or mindful movement, the key is making the ritual conscious. That's what turns a routine into a real kickoff for the day. Last week we got stuck on why some mornings feel like a sprint, while others just flow. So let's dig into what actually makes a routine powerful. This is Unlocking the Power of Daily Routines, where we break down the hidden mechanics behind a productive day.
I keep wondering, is it just about willpower, or are there underlying triggers that make certain habits stick? For example, research from Duke University suggests that over 40% of our actions each day aren't conscious decisions, they're habits. If that's true, why do my so-called habits evaporate the moment I have an early meeting or my phone buzzes? Is there a secret handshake I missed for building routines that survive real life?
Here's the takeaway. Routines aren't just about discipline, they're about reducing friction. The less effort it takes to start, the more likely you'll keep going, even on chaotic days.
That makes sense, but what about momentum? Is there evidence that stacking small wins early in the day actually boosts focus later on, or is that just wishful thinking? Let's clarify, when you say momentum, do you mean a psychological boost, or is there a measurable effect on performance? Because my coffee routine gives me a mood lift, but I'm not sure it makes me any more productive.
Great point. Let's define our terms as we go. And for listeners, think about your own routines. What's one small habit that consistently sets you up for a better day, and what's one that always falls apart? We'll unpack why that happens. Only after 2 iterations of switching up my breakfast did I realize how much a lighter meal changes my focus. When I stick to oatmeal and fruit, I'm less likely to crash mid-morning.
That matches what I've tracked in my own routine. On days I combine a smoothie with reviewing my calendar, I get through my first 3 tasks about 20% faster. It's like the planning primes my brain while the nutrients keep me steady. But what if you're the kind of person who can't even find the blender before noon? Isn't there a risk of turning breakfast into another chore?
Fair point. I think the trick is to keep it so simple you can do it half asleep, like prepping overnight oats or just having whole grain toast ready. The goal isn't a gourmet meal. It's to avoid decision fatigue.
And the data supports that. People who automate their first meal and their first 10 minutes of planning report lower stress levels throughout the day. It's a small investment for a measurable payoff. Still, I wonder if some folks need variety to stay motivated. Wouldn't experimenting with different breakfasts help you figure out what actually works, instead of just defaulting to routine?
Here's the takeaway. Start with something light and easy. Pair it with a quick review of your day and adjust from there. The point is to set a positive tone, not to add pressure. Listeners, try one tweak this week and see how your energy holds up. Only after 2 iterations of my own morning routine did I realize how often I misunderstood the word hydrate. I used to think it just meant drinking coffee, but apparently that's not quite right.
That's a common mix-up. Hydrate specifically means to drink water or fluids that actually help your body stay balanced. Coffee, because of its caffeine, can sometimes do the opposite. So if someone says they hydrate with orange juice, is that legit? Or does it have to be plain water for it to count? Orange juice does count since it provides fluids, but it's also got sugar. For language learners, it's useful to know that hydrate usually implies water or something without a lot of additives.
Here's the takeaway. Understanding hydrate helps you talk about healthy habits, not just any drink. Now, what about stretch? I always picture athletes, but is it just for sports?
Stretch means to lengthen your muscles, and it's not limited to athletes. Even a simple reach for the ceiling after waking up is a stretch. It's a practical word for describing gentle movement in any routine. If someone says they do a light breakfast, does that mean they're eating less food or just something easy to digest? Usually, light breakfast refers to a small meal that's not heavy like fruit or yogurt. It's about avoiding foods that make you feel sluggish.
And finally, to-do list. That one's everywhere. But I notice people sometimes confuse it with a schedule. The difference is, a to-do list is just a set of tasks, not tied to specific times. Only after 2 iterations of skipping breakfast did I realize how much it derailed my focus. It's almost like the first decision sets a domino effect for the rest of the day.
That chain reaction is measurable. Studies show that people who stick to a consistent morning routine report up to 23% lower stress levels throughout the day. But I wonder, does strict adherence always help, or can flexibility be just as effective? If routines are supposed to make us feel in control, why do I sometimes feel trapped by them? What happens if you swap out planning for improvisation? Does the day really fall apart, or is it just our perception?
Here's the takeaway. The most impactful part of my morning isn't the checklist, it's the intentional pause before I start anything. When I skip that, everything feels rushed, even if I technically follow the rest.
That pause might be the hidden variable. There's evidence that even a 2-minute mindfulness practice can improve cognitive flexibility. So maybe it's less about the exact steps, more about the mindset we bring to them. But if the mindset is what matters, why do we obsess over the order? Wouldn't it make more sense to identify which habit actually triggers our best days instead of copying someone else's routine?
Exactly. I'd challenge listeners to pinpoint the one morning habit that consistently boosts their mood or productivity. It's not about rigid schedules, it's about finding what works and doubling down on it. Only after 2 iterations of rearranging my calendar did I realize my energy spikes around 2 p.m., right after a quick walk. That's when I schedule the toughest tasks, anything requiring deep focus.
That lines up with research showing cognitive performance peaks mid-afternoon for most people. I've tracked my own productivity, and meetings after 3 p.m. tend to drag unless I've taken a 10-minute break beforehand. But how do you decide what counts as a real break? If I just scroll emails, my brain feels foggy. Stretching or stepping outside seems to reset things, but I wonder if there's a minimum time needed.
For me, 5 minutes is enough if I actually leave my desk. The key is changing scenery, standing up, grabbing water, or even chatting with someone nearby. It's not about the length, but the shift in activity.
There's data backing that. Micro breaks under 10 minutes improve concentration and reduce error rates. Snack breaks help too, as long as it's something light like nuts or fruit, not heavy carbs. I partly agree, but if I'm in the middle of a creative sprint, even a short pause can break my flow. Wouldn't timing breaks around natural stopping points be smarter than using a timer?
Here's the takeaway. Experiment with both scheduled breaks and intuitive pauses. The goal is to prevent burnout, not disrupt momentum. If you notice fatigue or distraction, that's your cue to step away, even briefly. Last week, I swapped my usual pasta lunch for a quinoa salad, and the difference in my afternoon focus was honestly dramatic. It's wild how just changing one meal can reset your energy levels.
That lines up with research showing that heavy, carb-rich lunches can spike blood sugar and then cause a crash. For example, a 2022 workplace study found that employees who ate lighter meals reported 18% higher productivity in the afternoon. But isn't it possible that the real culprit is eating at your desk? If you're distracted, even the healthiest salad might leave you sluggish. What if the key is actually stepping away and eating mindfully?
Here's the takeaway. Both the meal and the environment matter. I've started blocking off 20 minutes to eat away from my screen, and it's made a noticeable difference.
There's also a cultural angle. In Spain, for instance, lunch is the biggest meal, but it's paired with a long break. That extended pause seems to help people recharge, even after a heavier meal. So, if we experiment with both what we eat and how we eat, we might find a formula that keeps the afternoon slump at bay. Have either of you tried a full-on lunch break, European style?
I have, and honestly, it felt strange at first, but I came back to work with more clarity. Maybe it's time we rethink not just our lunch choices, but our lunch routines. Only after 2 iterations of shifting my toughest work to right after lunch did I realize my brain actually cooperates more than I expected during that window.
That lines up with research showing most people experience a temporary energy rebound post-lunch cortisol and glucose levels stabilize. So cognitive performance can spike for about 60 to 90 minutes. But what if your so-called energy rebound is just a sugar rush from dessert? If I tackle a big project then, I'm more likely to rewrite my to-do list than finish anything.
Fair point, but I've found that even without sugar, blocking out that early afternoon slot for deep work means I'm less likely to procrastinate and more likely to leave evenings free.
There's also evidence that individualized rhythms matter. A 2022 meta-analysis found that about 30% of people hit their cognitive peak later in the afternoon, so a universal rule doesn't fit everyone. So, if I'm a night owl and my brain's still booting up at 2 p.m., am I doomed to mediocre afternoons? Or should I just schedule my hardest tasks for when I'm actually awake?
Here's the takeaway. Experiment with your own energy curve, but don't default to saving big tasks for last test that early afternoon slot and see if it buys you a more relaxed evening. Only after 2 iterations of my afternoon routine did I realize how much the word recharge actually matters. For me, it's not just a break, it's a reset button that lets me tackle the rest of the day.
That's interesting, Daniel. When I track my energy levels, I notice a clear, sluggish period around 3 p.m., and research shows that over 60% of office workers report a similar energy slump in the afternoon. If sluggish had a mascot, it would be me staring at my inbox after lunch, wondering if caffeine counts as a life skill. But seriously, does using these words actually help you change your habits, or is it just semantics?
For me, naming it helps. When I say energy slump, I can plan for it, like scheduling a walk or a quick regroup with my team instead of pushing through and making mistakes.
There's data to back that up. People who label their afternoon dip as sluggish or an energy slump are 30% more likely to adopt strategies like power naps or focused work sprints, according to a 2023 workplace survey. So, if I call my 4 p.m. snack break a recharge, does that mean I'm building better habits or just justifying my cookie addiction?
If it helps you regroup and get focused again, maybe it's both. The key is being intentional, using the right word to clarify what you need in that moment. Only after 2 iterations of trying to meditate right after shutting my laptop did I realize my brain needed a physical cue, so now I always take a brisk walk before anything else.
That makes sense. There's research showing that even a 10-minute walk can lower cortisol levels by up to 20%, which helps the mind shift out of work mode more effectively. But what if your walk is just a loop around your kitchen island? Does that still count? Or is my brain doomed to stay in spreadsheet mode forever?
If it's intentional, I think it counts. The key is signaling to your brain that the workday is over, whether that's a walk, stretching, or even changing into different clothes.
I also keep dinner light something like a veggie stir-fry because heavy meals can disrupt sleep cycles and make it harder to truly unwind. So, if I swap my phone for a jazz playlist while I cook, am I halfway to enlightenment or just hungry with better music taste?
Here's the takeaway. Whatever the ritual, the point is to create a clear boundary so your mind gets the message that it's time to reset, not just pause. Last week, I found myself scrolling through my phone way past midnight, even though I know better. It's almost like my brain craves that last bit of stimulation, but the payoff is always grogginess the next morning.
That's a classic trap. Studies show that even 30 minutes of screen exposure before bed can suppress melatonin production by up to 50%. It's not just anecdotal, there's real science behind why we feel wired after late-night scrolling. If screens are so disruptive, why do we keep reaching for them? Is it habit? Or is there something else at play, like boredom or stress? I wonder if swapping the phone for a book is enough, or if we need a bigger ritual overhaul.
Here's the takeaway. Small swaps can make a big difference. For me, brushing my teeth and washing my face are non-negotiable cues. They signal to my body that it's time to wind down, even if my mind is still racing.
And there's data to back that up. Consistent routines like reading or sipping herbal tea have been linked to improved sleep latency and quality. The key is repetition. The body learns to associate these actions with rest. But what about those nights when you just can't settle? Is it better to force yourself into the routine or allow some flexibility? I'm skeptical that rigid rituals work for everyone, especially if stress levels are high.
It's a balance. Rituals aren't magic, but they're powerful signals. Maybe listeners can share which habits they refuse to skip and which ones are still a struggle. Sometimes, just dimming the lights or playing soft music is enough to shift gears. Only after 2 iterations of trying to wind down with music did I realize the phrase means more than just turning off the lights. It's about mentally shifting gears too.
Exactly, Daniel. The term reset button is fascinating. According to a recent survey, over 60% of people associate it with activities like reading or sipping herbal tea, not just sleep. But if unwind is supposed to be relaxing, why does my brain treat scrolling social media as the opposite? Maybe the metaphor doesn't fit everyone.
That's a good point. The literal meaning of herbal tea is clear, but figuratively, it signals a ritual, almost a cue for the body to start letting go of stress.
And when learners use these metaphors, their descriptions become more vivid. For example, saying, "I hit the reset button with a book," paints a much richer picture than just "I read." Still, if someone says "wind down" and ends up answering work emails, does the vocabulary lose its meaning? Or does it reveal how hard it is to disconnect?
Here's the takeaway. Mastering these evening routine phrases helps you express not just what you do, but how you feel about unwinding. Try using one tonight and notice if it changes your mindset. Only after 2 iterations of trying to stick to a rigid morning routine did I realize how much more sustainable it was when I allowed for some flexibility, like swapping meditation for a quick walk if I woke up late.
That lines up with a recent study I read. People who built in adaptable routines reported 23% higher satisfaction with their daily lives compared to those who tried to follow strict schedules. It seems the ability to pivot is just as important as the routine itself. But what happens when your so-called flexible routine turns into an excuse for skipping the hard stuff? Isn't there a risk that too much wiggle room just leads to chaos?
Here's the takeaway. Intentional routines aren't about perfection. They're about creating anchors. Even if the details shift, having a few non-negotiables, like a midday pause or a set mealtime, can keep you grounded when everything else feels unpredictable.
And those anchors don't have to be big. Micro habits like a 2-minute stretch or jotting down a quick intention can cumulatively reduce stress levels. There's evidence that these small acts boost resilience, especially during high-pressure weeks. So, if life throws a curveball, say a sick kid or a last-minute deadline, how do you decide which parts of your routine to keep and which to drop? Isn't that where self-awareness comes in?
Exactly. It's about knowing which habits actually recharge you versus which ones are just there out of habit. The real skill is adjusting on the fly without losing your sense of balance.
Only after trying to meditate in the evening for a week did I realize how much my sleep improved, even if I missed a day or two. The overall effect was there.
Here's the takeaway. Routines don't need to be flawless to make a difference. Start with one small change, like stretching for 5 minutes in the morning or setting a consistent bedtime, and commit to it for just 7 days.
But what if someone gets bored or forgets? Isn't it easy to slip back into old habits if life gets hectic? That's a fair point. Research shows that pairing a new habit with an existing routine, like stretching right after brushing your teeth, can increase your success rate by up to 50%.
And don't underestimate the power of a midday reset. A light lunch and a 10-minute walk can boost afternoon focus, even on busy days.
If you're still skeptical, try tracking how you feel for a week. Sometimes, seeing small wins on paper is the nudge you need to keep going. Plus, learning the vocabulary like keystone habit or ritual stacking makes it easier to talk about your progress and tweak your approach.
To wrap up, building healthier routines is about progress, not perfection. Pick one tip, maybe a calming evening ritual or a smarter afternoon break, and give it a real shot this week. Thanks for joining us. And if you found these ideas helpful, share your favorite new habit with our community or subscribe to Mr. and Mrs. English channel for more practical strategies. See you next time and have a wonderful weekend.